Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time popping in to see me. We are going to be doing my May deck reviews and I guess book reviews. What this is kind of turned into. So I'm going to be talking about all of the decks I worked with in May, as well as books I've been reading, all the good stuff. I tend to put the books near the end because they can run the gambit for like what they're about. So I'll put that near the end. I have a ton of stuff to talk about because I've been playing with a ton of stuff this month, and these are going to be in pretty much no particular order. So I'm going to do my best to remember what I used everything for as I go through. Wish me luck. May the odds be ever in my favor. Let's get into it. Quick note for number one, the Sunny Delight I have in this adorable unicorn mug with a rainbow straw because I was thirsty and I didn't want soda or anything. Also, Skittles Nails, inspired totally by Krista over at Krista Chronicles, who she recently did a video, I will try to remember to link it down below, releasing, like kind of going through a deck that she's created and put on Make Playing Cards, which is absolutely beautiful, by the way. And she had done Skittles Nails, which is, well, that's what I call it, but like where you do different nail polish and different nails. And so I did my rainbow pastel sort of situation. It makes me happy. So anyways, she inspired me. I got these polishes, these creams specifically so I could do this type of manicure, and I've done it like once before, but it was time. It was time. Plus it's so spring, right? Before we get into it though, just a quick note, if you are new here, hello, my name is Lisa. Nice to meet you. Thank you for popping in. I, in addition to being a YouTube content creator, am also a tarot deck creator and an author, and I will throw up a graphic on the screen so you can check out some of my work and where you can get it. But also, as of today, I can definitely tell you that my next deck, Unicorn's Journey Oracle, is going to be hitting Kickstarter very, very soon. The pre-launch page is up and I will have it linked down below, so make sure you check that out. It's really, really helpful when you click follow the project if you are genuinely interested, because it gives me an idea of how to do some planning as I prepare to launch. Now, just like with my previous deck launches, we will be having a live launch party here on the channel, so I will let you know the date and time and all the stuff for that once I know, but the deck is done. It's basically done. We've got a few little tweaks to do. I'm just working on box design finalization, and I finished the guidebook. I finished all the things. I just need to get prototypes in. Once they come in, I will definitely come on here and show them to you for sure. But then we'll be able to, like, once I have prototypes, I'll be able to set the official date for launch. But I am aiming for sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So you have a heads up. That's what we're looking at. With that said though, let's get into it. So the first deck I want to talk about, and I'm so sorry, again, I never remember to write people's names down, and I seriously apologize. I'm really bad at it, and I'm very sorry. But if you joined Danny and I for Glitter and Gators this past Sunday, I guess at the time you're seeing this, it will have been 2 Sundays ago, we were doing a tag. It was the show us your decks tag. And in that, I talked about how this is a deck that hadn't seen any playtime on my table. The Wildway Oracle is actually a deck that is based on the Decans. My deck is actually currently in order. And I got this quite some time ago for the purposes of doing a deck and walk in like a more approachable way. But I waited because I knew they were working on a book, and I'm so glad I did because the book is incredible. But anyways, to fast forward to how I ended up using this actually, which was not the plan. I thought I was going to table this until next year because deck and walks typically start at Aries 1, which is sometime in April, I guess. And I was late to the party, but I really, really wanted to play with this. And I was just telling myself that I couldn't unless I started like Aries 1. But then somebody in the chat, and I apologize. If you know who you are, please fess up down below and I will thank you profusely, because somebody was like, you could just start like anytime. And I was like, I kind of thought about it as the chat went on, and it just kind of sat in my brain, and I was like, wait, I can't start at any time. Like, I don't have to wait for Aries 1. So I decided to just look up what decan we were in, and we were in Gemini 1. So at the time I'm writing this, like really, it's only been a couple of weeks. Well, I guess about a couple of weeks, because we're now in Gemini 2 at the time I'm filming this. So yeah, I pulled out the card. In fact, here it is here. I pulled out the card for Gemini 1, and now of course Gemini 2, and it is what we're in at the time of filming, and this says Embrace Contradiction. And basically what I did is I just read the intro to this guidebook, book, I don't even know if I want to call it a guidebook. This will totally work as a beautiful standalone decan book. If you are interested and you want a really approachable introduction to decans, this is so incredible. But I read the entire intro, and then I just hopped into Gemini, read the intro to Gemini, and then I read Gemini 1 and sat with that card. And then when it was time to flip decans, I flipped to Gemini 2. And basically how I'm using this is super simple. How I'm using this is basically I keep the book and the little box of cards, like on my reading table. And when I think of it and I happen to be walking by, I'll pull up my phone and I'll ask it, what decan am I in, basically, to see if it's time to like change the decan or whatever. And I have a little card stand. I just pop the card in and then I read that section of the book and I call it a day. Super simple. But I do want to briefly talk because the deck is of course beautiful. It's nice to have the card out as like a, sorry, it keeps tipping over. There we go. It's nice to have the card out as a bit of a placeholder, but I think the gem in this, like the artwork is incredible. I don't know if I would see myself shuffling these cards and using them, but I think they would work really well that way. For now, I like them as just like kind of reminding myself to do this deck and walk thing. But I have to say, because I got this question in chat, and from what I've been able to tell from like my first sort of flip through of the book in general at the time we did that chat, I was like, the book seems really good, seems really conversational. But now that I've read the intro and actually read some of the entries, I can 100% say that this is so incredibly well done. The way that I described it in Glitter and Gators is I said that it feels kind of like a cross between like an intro book to decans in this case, to the decans and the deck and walk and these cards. It feels kind of like a cross between that and a children's book. So the language is written in this very accessible way. It's really laid out visually in a way that is so great if you have a short attention span sometimes like I do for this kind of thing. But you get like an introduction to sort of the deck. You get this adorable introduction to the planets where you have these super cute illustrations of the planets, a tiny little bubble that gives you just a little bit of basic info about each planet, and it does that for all the 7 traditional planets. You get like little call outs for the elemental energy, for cardinal, fixed, or mutable signs, like kind of what that means and how that groups. You've got this really great like description here of cardinal, fixed, and mutable qualities, which is actually apparently called something. I think it even says what it's called. Modality or quadruplicity, the 3 groups of 4 signs above, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Triplicity, what element does the sign belong to, is over here. And then you've got fire, water, air, earth. There's animal ambassador discussion, but it's all so digestible. There's a Wheel of the Year discussion here with a little brief explanation as well as an explanation of the moon phases. There is some astrology basics, including little glyphs. And these little call out boxes are just, it's exactly like what you would expect for like a super beginner book to this concept of decans. And it gives you just enough astrology, here's a decan wheel, to sort of wrap your head around how this works. And then when you get into the actual entries, so I'll go to Gemini, which is what I've obviously been reading, you get an introductory page to that sign. So once you enter the decans of Gemini, there'll be 3, so 3 10-degree periods that we go through, so roughly 30 days, give or take. You get an introduction, and it tells you a little bit about Gemini, but also about like the planets associated. So Gemini is the domicile of Mercury and is associated with these things. We also associate Gemini with this part of the solar year, and so it talks about that. So you get like a bit of an overview. You get a reminder here of what planets are associated. So here's the glyph for Taurus and the one for the air sign. So we know that this is air. And then you get into the actual card entries, which are 1 for each decan, and you get a full description of not only the decan information, like what Gemini 1 is all about, which in this case is trust yourself, and a nice summary at the top. Again, more glyphs. So we see Jupiter and Mercury here. A description of how the planetary energies play into it. A description of the animal that's on this card. So this is Magpie for Gemini 1, and literally a description of how and why Magpie works for this is in here, which is incredible for me. So Gemini 1 Magpie, it talks about that. And then it also pulls in the Rider-Waite-Smith card for the decan, talks through that, and you even get this adorable little reminder of these planets. So planetary rulers, Jupiter and Mercury. The tarot card is 8 of Swords, and the degrees for this decan are 0 to 9 degrees Gemini. So I've just actually, at the time of filming, finished reading for Gemini 2, and it's really memorable when you actually read this. So Gemini 2 is Embrace Contradiction. And so the author, Nicola Allen, talks here about how this particular decan is co-ruled by Mars and Venus. Now, Mars is a planet of like kind of aggression and intensity and war, and it talks about that. And Venus is like beauty. And so here we have an eagle, a beautiful animal that is also very ferocious and is a predator, holding a rose and holding it by the thorn piece. And like you understand that so much thought went into what animal was going to represent this decan and the energy of it. And this dichotomy between the eagle and the rose is intentional. We have the rose for the Venus and the eagle, which can also contain both of these energies, these dueling energies. And then again, an explanation of the card and how the card's energy represents the decan. It is so comprehensive while being so easy to read and digestible and understandable that this is exactly what I hoped it would be. I hoped that this would basically be a one-stop shop for a deck and walk, and that is what I have. It's not too dense. It doesn't like, because I'll be honest, I have a hard time reading densely written or very technical type writing around astrology. It makes the whole thing feel just so much more overwhelming. This breaks it down. Could not recommend it more highly, the book at least. But having the book and then also having the cards and knowing that, I think that as I read these and I get to know them, I think this is just such a great companion for a deck and walk. Now, I'm only, like I said, 2 decans in. I'm not trying to pretend I've read this entire thing, but I'm assuming that the flavor is going to continue the same way, and I just think that's incredible. So there is also, as you can see, some plant energies that show up. Like next time we have, it looks like a butterfly and a thistle. Is it thistle? I'm pretty sure. Okay, yeah, it talks about thistle. So I'm not gonna get ahead of myself, but very digestible, super, super easy. And I wanted to, I guess, circle back and say, hey, I took that advice and I just jumped into the deck and walk wherever. And I guess this is a reminder that if you have been curious and wanted to kind of dip your toes in, number one, this is just such a beautiful resource. But then number two, you could also be like locked up like I am and think you have to start it at a particular point. You don't. Just jump in whenever you want. And this just is so much less overwhelming than all the other types of ways I've tried to approach deck and walks in the past. So very excited about this, super happy about it. I'm probably not going to continue to report back on this every month unless, I don't know, something dramatically changes or I suddenly find myself having a different experience with it. I think this pretty much covers it. Oh my gosh, this video is going to be so long. I hope you have something like to drink. I hope you're cozy. I'm going to have a sip of my beverage. Okay, let's talk about my bedtime decks, and I'll try to keep it quick because they haven't changed that much. So one recent development. So I had been using the Seasons of the Witch oracles to sort of pull in seasonal energy for my bedtime readings. But for whatever reason, this is falling flat for me right now. It's just, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. Maybe it's because I've got the decans in there. Maybe there's another reason that it's just falling flat. But Beltane would be the one that I am in until Litha. But I think I just don't feel like I need this right now. Again, I think I've got the deck and walk cards kind of filling my seasonal vibe. I love this whole series of decks. I think they're beautiful. There's not a single one I've been unhappy with at all. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one away for now because I just haven't been pulling the cards at bedtime. I haven't been feeling it. So I haven't been. So nothing like negative to say, just that it's shifting. And I felt that last month, but I decided to keep the deck out and see if I wanted to reach for it in spite of the other things that I'm using. And I just didn't. So I'll be putting that away, but nothing negative to say. But my bedtime practice lately has been anchored with these decks. And these two are pretty much the same as they've been for quite a while now. This one for like the longest time, I feel like. But the new addition is the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Megan Watterson. I've really been enjoying pulling a card and reading from the guidebook. And it's funny because the whole point for me originally of bedtime decks was not to need to dip into a guidebook. But I have to say, this is a really beautiful deck. And so far, knock on wood, it hasn't seriously warped on me yet. So I don't know. It still feels like the exact same Hay House cardstock that I've been getting used to. But here's the thing. I went into this deck without really any expectations. I didn't really know what I was going to get from it. But I have genuinely gotten something super meaningful at bedtime out of just pulling a card and reading whatever it is the guidebook has to say. And I think that one of the things I'm really enjoying about it are these like little soul voice meditations kind of at the end. Like, what egoic story can I release right now so I can start again? Like just a little thought-provoking thing. What vision am I ready to receive from within? Or what do I testify to be true in this moment? Little, like just a momentary thought-provoking question, like just enough for me to slow down for a minute and not just experience the card in such a quick way, which I think a lot of times when you pull cards a lot for yourself, just as like routine practices, sometimes you can find yourself sort of zipping through. And with this, I feel like it slows me down just a little, and it just puts me in a more receptive sort of space. And I've been really enjoying that for bedtime. So that's the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Megan Watterson. And then I typically will pull, so I've been doing them kind of in this order. So I'll pull this, I'll slow down a little bit, and then I'll pull my Unicorn Tarot card. I've talked to you guys about this before. This is nothing new, but because this deck always has like a unicorn as like an assisting figure on the card or like a supportive figure and not the like main character, I tend to see that unicorn as how spirit or the universe or God or however you want to look at it showed up for me that day. And that's been really great. So I have been using it in that way. It continues to function really well as a reflective pull. And I think you could do this, like I said, with any deck where you have some sort of supporting character or characters. Maybe you've got a deck with with fairies that show up next to the people. Or maybe you've got a deck that has like humans as the main focus, but then animal companions on every card or something like that. So there's other ways to kind of do that. And then Mother Mary Oracle is always the last card I pull at the end of the little bedtime routine. And it's because I just pull the card and then I just flip it over and I read the little message. I love this little pocket oracle so much. It's the only one of these by Blue Angel that I have. And I just found out that the Alice the Wonderland Oracle, the Jasmine Beckett Griffith one, is coming out in this like format, and I'm thinking of picking that one up as well. But I'm just really loving this little trio. It's digestible. I feel like I get what I need from it spiritually. I feel like I'm getting what I need from it to sort of settle for sleep, and that's my main focus for these. So real happy with them. I'll probably stick with this trio for a while. Okay. Next up is a deck that I actually worked with through April and May as our deck study deck in the membership. So if you don't know, here on the channel, I have like a Patreon style thing. It's a YouTube membership, and at the foundational tier, so at the very first tier, you do get access to my deck study club. And what I do is essentially we typically will vote on a deck. This last time we didn't because this was such a high runner-up from like multiple previous polls that we just went with this. But this is Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle, and we basically did a whole like deep dive study. When I do these deck studies, what I do, just so that you know, is I sort of pre-study the deck. Like I still go through the study with everyone, but I do need to get into it enough to sort of wrap my head around how to structure the study, how we're going to go through it. We do typically go through an entire guidebook as part of the study, but there's usually activities I plan, and I might change the vibe of it depending on the vibe of the deck. Our next one, for example, is we're doing this one in May and June, or excuse me, June and July, is the Witch's Wisdom Tarot by Phyllis Curott and Danielle Barlow. And so that we're handling it in a completely different way. We will still be going through guidebook text just naturally, but we're more experientially going through it. Whereas this one was very much about like some really cool exercises we did in the beginning to kind of get to know the fairies before getting into the book, and then going through, getting to know the fairies, playing with them. This is a deck I've had forever, and just having a chance to like truly bond with it has been really great. This deck also got my channel flagged for some reason, so I'm gonna be a little careful, I guess, about what I show you. There is a little bit of nudity in these cards, so I'll try to be mindful. But I don't think I ever realized just how much structure there was in this particular deck. There's groups of fairies that sort of fall into different categories. Like these are singers, and singers are very much kind of like angelic, and they have like a totally different vibe. You have kind of helper fairies and more like sort of challenging fairies or troublemaking fairies, and each one sort of brings their own, like these two have a very similar feel. And there's an exercise we did near the beginning that's actually in the book. I didn't even know the exercise was in the book, where you basically pull cards and like answer a whole bunch of questions about it and really sort of get to know it before you dip into the book. And that was so helpful. There's my one like weird damage card, which has totally grown on me. I think it's weird how the thumb is sort of pointing to, and this is actually Arval Parrot, and he's all about communication and listening, and he's pointing to his throat chakra. And interestingly, this thumbprint is sort of aligned with his throat chakra, which now has kind of become a thing for me. Like I'm like, oh, interesting that that's the card about communication and listening, when I am such a yappy is the card. Of course that's the one. But it was really neat because this is one of those decks that has just like titles of the fairies, and going through this study has really brought these characters to life for me in a different way. I feel like I understand them better. This deck still has a very mysterious sort of vibe that is not like any other deck I've ever worked with or had, but going through the study has really just been such a cool experience because there's so much more to this than I realized, so much more intentionality, at least as far as the way that the fairies have been assigned different types of meanings and all kinds of things. So really enjoyed this study. At the time I'm filming it, we haven't actually had our member wrap up yet, so I'm trying to save some of my thoughts and not go down the rabbit hole too much in this particular video. But in any case, if you are interested in joining us for the membership or deck studies, as I said, this is available at the supportive tier. At the magical tier, I do monthly member readings. We also at the badass tier have test driving the tarot, which I'll be talking about. Actually, I might as well talk about that next. what we test drove. So Test Drive the Tarot is a series where I get a deck and we sort of hack it. It's very workshop-y. So we work on it together. We play with spreads. I do sample readings. We try to figure out how to make the deck work or how it works in real time, like in practice, and like where it might fit into a practice. And so for this month, I've got all these things that I used with it. But the main focus was actually this deck, the Exquisite Familiars Oracle by Richard Howdy Jr., who is Odd Mix Market. This was such a great test drive. I had so much fun. Last month we did the Mary L Tarot. So in April we did the Mary L, and that was just incredible. This one was so interesting. Let me get the book out of the way for a second. If you don't know Exquisite Familiars, it's not like really talked about that much, but it's really innovative. Like look at this. You've got different heads and different tails. And so essentially throughout the workshop, we just first of all kind of wrapped our head around it and how it worked. And I figured out, like originally when I had it, because you get 2 decks of cards that are the same. So like, as you can see, you've got 2 copies of this card 3, because it can be a head or it can be a tail. You know what I mean? It can be a front or a back. So you want both halves in the deck twice so that you can have different mixes. Like these look like they go together, but they're not. They're totally different creatures. And it's really, really interesting. So I'm not doing a very good job of capturing it, but we spent a bunch of time with it. We put it in deck families and we came up with a really cool spread. I'm going to save that. That was something that we did together. I'd like that to remain special for the members, but we came up with a really special spread that utilized different decks to sort of create this cohesive message and reading, where this sort of played this really interesting part in that reading. And like one of the things that came out about that is that this deck actually has some shadow worky sort of personal growth heavy leanings, which I did not know when I backed this deck. So the guidebook, the way that it's set up is that you have these like flip pages. And so the idea, I still haven't done the exercise. I'm going to do this in my own time, but the idea is that as you pull each card on the left, on each side, you'll have a little bit of lore, 2 options for wisdom and 2 options for affirmations. Same thing on this side, 2 options for wisdom, 2 options for affirmations. So depending on what combo you get, you'll have, obviously, it's kind of like, and this is what I talked about a bit in Tarot Test Drive, this is a little bit like teaching you how to do deck pairings in a way, because you're taking 2 energies and you're merging them together to create sort of one whole concept or one whole idea. And so it's really cool that way. It like pairs itself, if that makes sense. And one of the mechanics that Richard suggests in using this, and you don't have to do this, it's your deck, you do what you want, but is that you basically, the first time you encounter a particular head or back end, you choose which of the 2 wisdom pieces and which of the 2 affirmations feel right to you or feel like resonant with you, and then you mark them off. And from then on, that is your version of that card. That is the message that will apply when you pull that card. And so there's this interesting thing that happens where you get to literally personalize this deck. And what I noticed when we were going through it together and really kind of breaking it down is that there's definitely a way to hack this or to like personalize it where it gets quite shadow worky in a really interesting and new way, which I thought was super cool. So we kind of went down that road. It surprised us. I think a lot of us thought this deck was going to be really frivolous and sort of like light and silly. And while sure, there's a playfulness to the way that it's designed, the actual messaging in here has got so much more depth than I think people will assume about this. So we had tons of fun just playing with it by itself. And then we worked with different pairings. And my favorite sort of setup was actually, we tried it with Mons Tarot, which was really good. And then I did also try it with I've got it here, I'm forgetting the name, the Paulina deck, Fantasma. But then someone suggested that we try it with the Zeke's Arcana deck, and this was like the best. It was the best pairing. So essentially we had Tarot, and then we had these guys. And then we also worked with the Lucky Potion Oracle. This is by the same creator, so I'm just going to kind of show you what that would look like. And I always use the die when I use the Lucky Potion Oracle. If you're not familiar with this one, and this is like the Lucky Potion and like all of the expansions. By the way, these are all on linen, which is amazing. But with Lucky Potion, the idea is that you get a potion. So here we have defense. So here's the defense potion. And then you roll the die to see if you're going to drink the potion, which is that icon. Hopefully it's focused. You're going to smash the potion, like break it, throw it, break it. or share the potions. That's the icon for share. So depending on what face comes up, that tells you what you're going to do with the potion. And the guidebook takes you through a little narrative about what you see when you approach this potion. You sort of like see it on a shelf. It'll describe it like you're in a story. And then you'll see a different option to read based on which action you're taking with the potion, and that will also be written narratively. It's a very, very cool deck. I love this deck. But these worked all very, very well together. The Zeke's Arcana played really nicely with this. I will say it also did work really well with Mon's Tarot, and I think any deck that's got a lot of bold color would probably look really cool with this, but I'm sure there's other pairings as well, and if you can think of any, share them in the comments down below for people, because I don't think you can get Zeke's Arcana anymore. But you kind of get the idea of how this would work. But this, using this specific grouping, we came up with just a really cool spread, and it was so much fun. So I had a blast, and I've really been enjoying in general the tarot test drives. So we do that once a month in the Badass Unicorn tier in the membership, and it's just been a lot of fun. So it was really cool to pull Lucky Potion in, and kind of, it just feels so cohesive as a grouping. But what we also did during this workshop is talk about how the spread worked with these specific decks, and then what other decks you could use to accomplish the same goal. So it's not meant to be so deck specific in the test drive, like it is, but it's also meant to be, even if you don't have these decks, the idea is that by the end of it, we've got ideas and plans for how we could use something that we already have in our collection. Because that's kind of the point, I think, with Tarot Test Drive. When I first started it, and it's only been a couple months now, my goal was to like have a series that's going to help us make more use of what we already have. So anyways, we worked with all of these in that. So I wanted to show them because it was just a really fun experience. But you see what I mean? We're going to be here forever because I feel like I have so many things to talk about that I played with this last month. Okay, now let's talk about, oh goodness, my mishap. Y'all, okay. So the Voice of the Souls and the Cries of the Souls Oracle. I have things to say. So this was when I do my recent deck roundups, I ask y'all what you want to see a walkthrough of. And this was one of the most requested ones. And I will tell you that I did film, or attempt to film, a walkthrough. I did fully film, actually, a quite detailed exploration of these two decks. And then I lost the footage. And y'all, I just did not have the energy. I did not have it in me to do it all over again, not to mention the fact that there were so many things that came up organically during that video that I couldn't recreate in an authentic way, even if I wanted to refilm it, which I'll be honest, I totally didn't. But if I had, it would have been so difficult to do in any kind of authentic way. So I'm going to recap what I discovered here and sort of summarize for you what ended up happening. So I assumed when I got Cries of the Soul, and I talked about it in my recent deck roundup, I was real excited because this is very much a mass market shadow work deck that I think is just really, really well done. It's got titles, it's got a little message underneath, it's super usable right out of the box. I don't think you even need to dip into the guidebook, but if you do, there's some great shadow worky kind of things in here. But the card themes are really great. They explore shadowy themes. It's really easy to work with. It's really non-confrontational in its imagery. Like, it's direct and it's clear, but it's not like super in your face. Like, one of the things that I love about, say, the indie deck Wisdom of the Shadow is just how bold and visceral the artwork is, but that can be a lot, especially if you're new to shadow work. Sometimes that can feel a little intense. And so this can be a little bit more approachable sometimes in that way. Plus, I'm all about highlighting mass market shadowy decks because we just don't have a lot of them. A lot of mass market decks tend to lean a little bit more uplifting in their messaging. And so anyways, really love this. So I picked up Voices of the Souls on recommendation. Still glad I got it. Still glad I checked it out. You can probably see where this is going. But it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I literally thought it was like the more uplifting, like positive side of this. But it's totally got a completely different vibe. It's a cool vibe. But if I'd have realized kind of what the intention of this deck was by the creators, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, because the punchline of this deck is that it's essentially designed to be a mediumship deck. It literally says on the back, develop your intuition, mediumship, and spiritual strength. This is definitely a deck that would be really great for sort of tapping into or stretching your more psychic or intuitive muscles, particularly when it comes to working with other energies or entities when you are reading. So again, mediumship work, listening to other voices, and very much the guidebook in here is written with that tone. It is not like the uplifting side of a shadow work deck. It is very much its own thing with its own system. And unlike the shadow work deck, we get titles on the cards, but no little messages underneath. So that immediately was like, uh-oh. And there are some shadowy themes in here because it is not meant to be a positive or like light counterpart to Cries of the Souls like I thought. And so the name is clear. The messaging on the box is clear. I'm sure that the website description is absolutely clear. I clearly did not read any of those things before I picked it up because I just saw the art and I saw the name and I just made an assumption. And this is just lesson learned for me, right? It was not something that resonated. And as I went through the cards and I kind of flipped through the guidebook, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not at all what I thought it was. And I tried to pair it with Cries of the Souls. I did actually pull this out for my member readings. And there's these black cards too that are like very clearly like meant to be like messages from other, like from ancestors or from like other. And that's just not how it's just not how I work with my cards typically. I don't put myself in communication with other most of the time. I would say virtually all of the time. I am in communication with self. I'm in communication with maybe my personal like guides or things that are in line with my spiritual path, but not so much other entities. When I am asked as a reader to give a message from somebody's spiritual team, I'll allow that to come through if it comes through in an authentic way, but I never force it. And so anyways, bottom line for me, this was not necessarily a good fit for my personal practice or how I see it. I still tried though. I did try to pair them and they just did not pair well. They did not pair well. And so I tried a couple times during my member readings and it wasn't flying. So I put this away and stopped trying to force it. And this one is not staying in my collection. There's no point in putting it through like a declutter situation. It's just not going to stay. But Cries of the Souls worked out so, so well. And I actually ended up pairing this a lot with the Lacrimosa Tarot. I really should get this out of its tuck box because I don't need it. I don't need the tuck box. I'm going to put the tuck box. This is what I do in case you're ever curious. The way that I store my tuck boxes when I'm not using them, like I'm just putting my stuff bags, I just sort of open both sides and I just flatten it like that. And then you can basically, they take up very little space. So I have a bin and all these like tuck boxes, even the heavier duty ones. As long as the bottom's open. Sometimes the bottoms are glued, which is, I hate because then I have to chuck them in storage and they take up more space. But if they open on both sides like this, I can just like lay them out nice and flat and store them. So that's what I'm going to do with that. But anyways, Lacrimosa was, oh my gosh, I pulled this into member readings and I also pulled this into member readings. I did pair these and they paired beautifully together, but also I read with Lacrimosa by itself and Cries of the Souls by itself, and both just read so well. I've already shown a bunch of these cards, so I'm not going to whip them out. Well, maybe I will, just so you can see what they look like together. But Lacrimosa read so much more easily than I think I imagined that it would. It really spoke to me, and I don't know why. It's definitely not my typical aesthetic. I loved, let me just put a few of these like on either side so you can kind of see the vibe as I like lay these cards down. Let me be just chaotic all over my table here. I just want you to kind of see the vibe. This is so rich, this imagery, that I don't know, Cries of the Souls, just, I don't know, it just worked really, really well with it. But anyway, even just this by itself, I'm just doing it this way so that I can avoid any nudity because YouTube is like having a moment these days. There's something about this that I just never struggled to wonder what the card was telling me when I pulled it in a reading, which you would think this is far enough outside my normal purview that I would have struggled a bit, but I just didn't. I always knew what it was saying. And it brings a sort of, it invites a more contemplative look at the cards, I feel like. It invites a little bit more curiosity in what could be implied by the energy of that card. There's something about it that feels like an invitation, like a cracked door that you kind of got to open slowly and sort of walk through at your own pace. But it was really effective. And this paired with Cries of the Souls just worked great for me. I still like this perfectly paired with Cave of Sybil. I think it works really well with Cave of Sybil, which I don't think I grabbed Cave of Sybil because I don't think I used it actually this month. But in any case, Lacrimosa read great during member readings, and so did Cries of the Soul. I don't ultimately know the long-term future of this deck with me because I have a couple of other shadow work decks that I also really like, and I don't know how many I really truly need. But it's really great, and I'm happy to recommend it to people because I think it's got a lot to offer. And the guidebook, by the way, if you're working with it for yourself, What's really great is it gives you wisdom, supplement, and warning. So, and then moving forward. So it really helps you kind of work with the energy. There's enough there. There's enough substance to really work with it and not feel like you're just kind of like flapping in the breeze with this difficult topic. It really kind of guides you through. So loved that, and definitely loved working with Lacrimosa. That's a fun one. Okay. Moving to something else that I used during member readings. What else did I use? Ah, yes. I used the Crystal Struck Tarot. I had the most fun reading with this deck. It was fabulous in so many ways. It was one of the more requested ones for me to use. This deck is full of so much like little bling. It's so cute. This is the mini. I am so glad I got the mini. I felt like it was really easy to like hand over hand shuffle it. It didn't feel awkward. I didn't try too hard to riffle it. I can riffle it if I split it into smaller piles, but like for reading with it in real time, like in member readings, I just hand over handed it and it worked perfect. And it sparkles when you work with it because it's got so much foiling on it. It's so pretty. It's so pretty. But here's what really excited me about this deck is that it's pippish, but the pips are clearly arranged with intention. There's little hints at the Rider-Waite Smith throughout. So you're definitely not like, this is clearly a hint at the hoopa or bower or whatever you call that structure in the Four of Wands. The Eight of Swords, we've still got a bound thing. But what's cool is that the crystals, most of the crystals I feel like I have enough of a connection with that they were adding something to the reading for me just on their own with my own crystal knowledge. But then I would also use this little guidebook and just flip to whatever the crystal was and read the little bit of text about the crystal and how it, like what its keywords were. So like, for example, what is this one? The Page of Swords Kyanite. So I already know how that works. But if I go to the little guidebook and I go to the Page of Swords, Kyanite, communication, energy, and cleansing. And so you pair that with what you know of the Page of Swords. And there's actually a write-up about the Page of Swords in here as well. But I was really liking whenever I didn't know a crystal well, like I know Kyanite and how it would play in. But when I didn't know a crystal, I would just quickly flip and just look up the keywords for the crystal during the readings and like remind myself of the crystal's keywords and then weave that in. And it was just really great. It added a whole other layer. I think that I've worked with other crystal like Oracle decks before, and they've always kind of worked for a short time, but never really kept, I don't know, been something that I wanted to reach for, I guess, long term. I think this works so well for me because it's tarot and because the person who put this together, the creator, who is this? I'm so sorry, Moonstruck Crystals. If there's an actual person's name on here, I don't see it. Art by Kara Pavlik. Regardless, this person clearly knows crystals and knew tarot well enough to very mindfully pair them. So the pairings, they work. And the pips are so expressive. It's not a pip deck where it's just like a bunch of something on the card. Like there's true meaning behind it. And you can see it in the arrangement of the pips, in what you see. Like here, you've got 8 pentacles arranged like this, but there's a book that's open and this vine that's wrapping around this florite here. And the way the crystals are actually illustrated on these cards, I don't think the camera does it justice, but they literally look like what they're supposed to look like. Like here is Aqua Aura Quartz. And I don't know if you can see just how gorgeous. So again, this is the pocket edition. It was out of stock for a bit, but it seems to be back in stock now. So check it out. I will have links to everything I talk about down below, but this is so great. And this was something I hadn't heard of. Jenny Soros, ? Is your display name still Jenny Soros? Anyways, Jenny was the one who told us about this. It was actually during one of our Zoom style deck study club wrap-ups that Jenny hopped on camera with us and we were chatting about our deck study club deck, which was the Squid Cake Marseille at the time. And so she was using this for some pippish exercises we were doing during that discussion, showed this deck. I totally bought this deck because I magpied it because like, look how sparkly. And it turned out to be such a great little deck. I'm so happy I picked it up. It's really worked out well. So Crystal Struck, red like a dream, pocket textured. So y'all have seen my walkthrough. I pulled this out because I did try to work with it for myself a little bit. I knew it probably wouldn't. It didn't work out for me. I'm too attached to my first edition. And as so many of you pointed out in the comments, it does just feel like a different deck. It's a great deck on its own. It's just not, it's not what I wanted it to be. I wanted a mini of the original. And I kind of knew that going in. So I did go in with a bit of bias and I need to own that. But I have heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard a rumor that perhaps the original textured tarot may be reprinted in the future. And I hope that if the creator does reprint the original textured tarot in the future, that it's on this cardstock, because this is fabulous cardstock. It's linen, black core, nice, easy to shuffle, and this little pocket size is fabulous. But I just don't like the redesigned art as much as I needed to really be able to bond with this new version of the deck. And it sounded like some of you felt the same, and some of you were like, no, it's just a totally different deck. It's like stands on its own. And I don't disagree, but unfortunately for me, it just does not work, which is a sadness. So this will not be staying in my collection either. Again, there's no need to put it through a declutter round. I know it's not staying, but it will go into like purgatory or whatever for a bit before I eventually find it a new home. Okay, and then also in our member readings, I also read with and had such a good time with the Crystal Visions Tarot. And I also worked with this myself for, I think, a week, maybe 2 weeks in May. And I just had a great time reading with this deck. Or maybe I worked with it in April and then pulled it into member readings in May. I know I read with it in member readings. It was so easy to read with. It was fun to read with. It does not feel like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, even though the card design, like the layout of the card and the banners, for some reason it gives me Rider-Waite-Smith clone vibes. The layout does, but the actual art isn't at all Rider-Waite-Smith clone like to me. It feels like it's definitely telling its own story. It's got its own energy. There is a full-size guidebook you can get for this deck on the creator's Etsy shop, I think it is. I don't think I need that, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure it adds a beautiful layer to what's happening in the art. But I didn't even really feel the need to dip into the little white book because it functioned so great just by itself. Still not a fan of the curved horn unicorns. I don't know what was happening there, but on its own merit, this is just a pretty deck. It's fun to work with. I've given it a bag, so it's sticking around. It's in my I Believe in Unicorns bag, which is great. And yeah, I'm pleased with this. This was fun to read with. It read really well. I had no complaints. And like I said, when I'm doing my member readings for my Magical Unicorns and Up every month, it really gives me a lot of opportunity to know if a deck's going to work for me or not, because I don't have the time to like really make it work, if that makes sense. It's either going to work or it's not in that context. And so it's really a good way for me to see how me and a deck are going to get along. And we definitely got along. It was great. So also for myself this month, I worked with the Fantasma Tarot. I worked with this a bit the last week of May, and it was good. It was fun. I did pull this out a little bit during Tarot Test Drive to see if it would pair with the Exquisite Familiars deck. And it was cool, but it kind of got lost a little bit. The artwork is a little bit softer. I love Paulina Fay's artwork, but something happens for me where I can really, really, really genuinely appreciate it. I appreciate the fantastical nature of it. I appreciate all her little tiny details. This art style is so distinctive, and you know it's Paulina when you're looking at it. It's incredible. I love her style. It's a little soft, it's a little gentle, and it's a little bit quirky and magical. But and this is probably my favorite of all of her decks. As some of you know, I spent a whole month and did a month-long like sort of deep dive into the Joie de Vivre Tarot at one point. That was such a fun study, but that deck didn't end up staying. And I don't actually ultimately know, like this isn't going anywhere right now. It's currently, I think I've got 2 Paulina decks in my collection. And I think my problem is I want to be more excited to reach for this than I am. Ultimately, even though these creatures are fantastical and a little bit like quirky, they're not just like straight up animals, it still sort of ends up feeling like an animal deck. And something about the way my eyes move over this artwork, I do end up kind of feeling like the details get lost. Even though if I really just sit and take it in, there's so many sweet little things I love. I love the little Ace of Swords, of course, it's a unicorn. But there's something about it where it becomes like too homogenous. And that is not fair for me to say, as far as it's not a judgment of the art. It's literally what happens in my brain. But there's a few unicorns through here. It makes me really happy. But I don't know. I had this on my reading table for the week, and I was like, eh. It was just kind of meh for me in practice, which is a bummer. I have not pulled this into member readings, but I think based on my experience working with it for myself, I don't think this would be a good one for that for me. And I've never really felt like I needed to pull this for member readings either. So we will see. I'm going to be starting filming a new collection and declutter series soon. I don't want to make any decisions on this just yet because I don't know. And like I said, it's my favorite of the Paulina decks tarots that I've tried. So I don't want to discount it. So I'm going to sit with it a bit and we'll see. But I have a feeling it'll be one of the ones I'm asking myself that question about when I do my declutter series. The other deck, or the last deck I used in monthly member readings that I haven't mentioned yet, is the Rainbow Tarot by, is this by S.O.? Sonia Lazo. So this is the indie version. This deck is available mass market now. I don't remember who the publisher is. This deck was actually gifted to me and I adore this deck. Look at, oh hey, says the rainbow. This is such a fab deck. There was another deck that came out mass market that looks eerily similar to this, and there is some drama there. If you're interested or curious about that, I encourage you to look it up. I'm not going to get into it because I don't know the full story, but finding out about that little bit of drama brought this kind of back to the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, I want to show the Rainbow Tarot some love. It's such a fun, colorful, quirky deck. It does, to me, feel very much like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone-ish, but the bright colors are so fun. I mean, like, this is the best deck for this manicure. Like, this manicure and this deck, they, like, made to go together. I really, really enjoy this. This deck makes me happy to work with. It's creative, it's fun, it's different enough from the standard Rider-Waite-Smith that I am excited and entertained by playing with it, but it fills that function for me of being that sort of neutral voice that a Rider-Waite-Smith clone type deck usually is for me. And what I noticed that I tend to do, and I can't remember if I've talked about this in these monthly deck reviews or not, but what I tend to do is when I'm planning out what decks are going to be in my monthly deck reviews, I have a tendency to always make sure I've got at least one deck that's kind of Pippish and one deck that's kind of Rider-Waite-Smithy, like kind of like either a clone or similar to a clone. Because I find that when I'm doing readings for a lot of people or doing back-to-back readings, that I always appreciate having a foundational Rider-Waite-Smith / clone style deck on the table because it has this sort of neutral voice for me when I'm working with it. And it just works. It just works. And this is one of my favorites. I don't have a lot of decks that I feel like that feel anything like this, to be honest. And I really enjoy working with this one. Plus it's got great hollow foiling on the sides. I don't know if, does the mass market, can somebody chime in down below? Does the mass market have hollow foiling on the side? Or does it have like a color? Or what's different, I guess. There's no guidebook with this one, but I don't think this is the kind of deck that I feel like I need a guidebook with or for. But anyways, love this, and it was gifted, so it's extra special for that reason too, but also it's in a rainbow bag. It makes me happy. But that was such a fun one and worked great in member readings. And then the next couple of pairings are decks that I just worked with for me and just for fun. I started out May actually working with these two, and this is an all-time favorite pairing of mine. It is the Tarot of Curious Creatures with the Animal Apothecary by Kara Elizabeth. These work great together, and I tend to use them pretty much exclusively together. But Tarot of Curious Creatures is, if I'm in a slump, if I'm in a kind of like a, I don't know, like a meh mood, or if I'm going through a rough time, this is such a great deck to bring some wisdom, but also some laughter and silliness. I literally have such a hard time looking at this deck and not... like literally not laughing. Like look at the face on the camel with the teeth. I can't. It's hilarious. This is so goofy and I love that about it. I love the quirk. I love these characters. They have so much personality. It's so freaking fun to read with. I'm trying to remember if I've pulled this into member readings. Members, do you remember? Somebody chime in. Let me know down below. Have I used this before in member readings? Because I can totally do that. But this works so well with Animal Apothecary, and I don't know, it just does. Animal Apothecary also has a bit of quirk and also some animal energy, and it just ends up being such a fun, like you can kind of see, as I lay the cards down here, you can kind of see, like this one says focus on the big picture, this one says small steps, big accomplishments, immense growth, see beyond the past, let go and bury, you're about to shine, destiny path, omnia unis est, inner truth, victory, claim your power. It's one of my favorites. This sometimes gives a shade similar to the inner alchemist. Oh, what is that one called? It's out of print now. I forget the name of it. Shake, release, heal, move on. It's just fun, but you can kind of tell, right? Like that they just kind of like would speak well to each other. Like they don't aesthetically like match perfectly, but the vibe of these is totally on point. So I read for myself with these and really enjoyed the readings that I did for myself. It was so fun. So that was a great way to sort of kick off May for myself personally. I want to say I maybe even worked with these for 2 weeks because I worked with Fantasma for 1 week. I worked with the other pairing I'm about to show for 1 week. I might have worked with this for 2 weeks. I was having fun with it. I think I might have. This also matches my manicure. Anyways, these are fun, and I do typically keep them hung like literally together on my, I have one rack on my wall where I have like perfect pairs hung up, and this hangs over there when it's not ahead of me on my favorites rack. But anyway, these were great, super fun. And then the last pairing, this is one, again, I just worked with for myself, was the Tarot of Echoes. And I apologize. I know a lot of y'all are waiting for this mass market to come out. I'm so glad I picked it up indie because I'm impatient and I knew it. I was going to wait for mass market because it was probably going to come out, I think, US Games. And I was like, I can wait. And then I'm like, I don't want to wait. And I'm glad I didn't. But I understand those of you who are like chomping at the bit already. Like, I get it. Mass market production timelines are really, really long. But of course, I used Tarot of Echoes with the Oracle of Echoes. And this is the later edition of Oracle of Echoes. I ultimately rehomed my first edition. This one just has more cards. But the Oracle of Echoes is definitely one of my favorite all-time decks. I will say this art style is very, very, obviously it's Anaturian. These are both illustrated by Anaturian. This art style is very, very similar. And the feel of this deck is very similar to the Arthurian Tarot, the French one that's also illustrated by Anaturian. So if you've been on the fence about like which, I have them both and I do enjoy them both, but I think this one is probably more readable right out of the box unless you're super, super, super familiar with the Arthurian legends. And I think you get a lot of the same feeling out of it, at least my opinion. This feels a little bit closer to the Arthurian Tarot than it does to the Oracle of Echoes. But of course, they still pair absolutely. Like, look at that. Six of Swords and New Horizons. That's an incredible pair. These were just easy to work with. They flowed together really beautifully. They felt cohesive together and very enjoyable. One of the things I like about Oracle of Echoes is just how fluid and like flowy and kind of like messy, I guess, the artwork is. And it feels more crisp in the Tarot of Echoes. So while I think they're very complementary, you can even kind of see it here, just even the way the face is here versus here, there's so much more detail. And obviously we can see that Anna's art has just continued to grow and develop, but I kind of was I almost kind of miss this kind of like softer, less detailed, more open, I guess, art sometimes. But again, they still pair beautifully. It just doesn't feel as Oracle of Echoes as I think I was originally planning. But I had such a great time reading with these. They read great together. The themes are cohesive. Everything really works. But yes, I get a lot of like medieval, almost Arthurian vibes from this, even though it's not the Arthurian. But I really do like it. And of all of Anna's tarots, this is probably my favorite for being just so easy to read right out of the box, just the same way that the Oracle of Echoes is so, so readable outside of the box. If you want a good, like, all-rounder Oracle, man, it doesn't get much better than this. This is such an incredible Oracle deck. The themes, it's really balanced. It covers so many different areas, and it just pairs with lots of things really well. Any type of smooshy watercolor, I don't have good technical terms, but any kind of watercolory thing, man, this works really well with. But yeah, so had fun reading with this pair, no complaints, but I've worked with these quite a few times and have always really enjoyed them. Okay, we've made it through the decks and we're on to books, and I've got like 4 to talk about. So if you're like, peace out, I'm here for the decks, cool, thanks for hanging out. But we're gonna move on and it's gonna be a little all over the place. So I actually finished 4 books, well, 3, I finished 3, I DNF'd 1, did not finish 1. We'll talk about that. So 3 are sort of in my secondary area of interest, which has been, I get into this with like my Bible study and my like sort of faith journey. I get into a lot of that in a dedicated live stream I did that I actually like sort of was organized for, and I go through a lot in that live stream. So I will link it down below, but it's called Charting My Spiritual Path. If you have questions about that, that's where to go to look at it and to sort of understand where I'm coming from. But I did finish some books along those lines in May. The first of these is The Bible and the Tarot by Gil Stafford. I don't think I've talked about this much yet. I don't think. But I did actually finish it. It does focus in on major arcana only. I would argue it doesn't go in hard enough on the biblical associate. Well, I don't know if I'm being entirely fair. There's quite a few of biblical associations here, but it does also kind of meander into other areas as well. I don't think this book is quite as focused on aligning the majors with Bible stories or with biblical tales or myths as I was expecting or hoping. And it's very like, it almost reads, yeah, the way the subtext, the subtitle, I think really does give you the vibe. It's a personal pilgrimage of discovery. We're really getting, I think, Gil's take specifically on the overlap between these two things. And Gil clearly loves the tarot and brings a lot of that interest in the tarot to the write-ups. But it has this flavor of like, this is Gil's interpretation. Obviously, that's why you write a book, is to give your interpretation. I don't know how to describe this. It felt like I was reading someone else's interpretation. I don't know how to say this and have it make sense. I hope somebody watching this understands. I'm not a book reviewer, clearly, but it felt like it wasn't for me. Like it was more like, it almost felt memoir-ish, which is weird because I don't think it's written memoir style. I don't know how to describe it. It's like, it's almost like it's, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. And I'm fading on that point. But one thing that is really interesting is that he does talk about quite a number of tarot decks in here, and he seems to use a different one for each major. Like for Strength, he talks about the Navigator Tarot of the Mystic Sea version of Strength. For the Chariot, he's talking about the Rider-Waite-Smith. For the Lovers, it's Guardian of the Night Tarot by M.J. Cullinane. And that part was really cool because he does go into kind of like the art a little bit. It's interesting. It's interesting, but it wasn't, I think, what I hoped it would be. And I don't even know how to define what that was. But I read it. I'm good now. That's where that landed. Okay, the other book I finished in May, and this one took me a bit. I was in and out of it for quite a long time, but I finally finished it. I probably read, like you'll probably see, I think I was probably about a third of the way through and then just kind of paused for a long time. And then in May, I like literally read like the rest of it. I just got on a roll. This is a really interesting book. So this is When God Had a Wife by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, The Fall and Rise of the Sacred Feminine in the Judeo-Christian Tradition. There's a lot of really great stuff in here. It really does go through in quite a lot of depth and detail the different divine feminine like archetypes that you do see throughout biblical text and how those things have been maybe glossed over or like shifted over time, how we can see signs that there was a lot more. Oh, what did I highlight? I'll have to reread that whole thing to understand why I highlighted that. I don't remember. I didn't do a ton of highlighting in this book, actually. That's just a very small amount. One of the things I love about this is if you want to go all in on like ancient Israel and how the ancient Israelites will have looked at the divine feminine, I think there's some really, really good stuff in here. They get into the Sophia, they talk about Asherah, they talk about Mary Magdalene, of course, and other figures, and it's very well referenced, and the bibliography is quite extensive. I swear I probably love some of these books for their bibliography just as much as for the content. I don't know what that says about me, but I just love reading where they reference, like what they referenced and who influenced their perspectives. And there is a few authors they kind of refer to a lot, but I found this interesting. It was a little bit, I feel like, too long for what I wanted this book to be. And so it lost me attention span wise several times over, but I always found my way back. And I feel like I got so many good juicy tidbits about the divine feminine within the Judeo-Christian tradition from reading this. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I will reread it, but I think I might keep it for like a reference for a while. So we'll see. This was so much easier to read, oddly. And this is a dated book. Like it's actually, this is the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, and someone who actually commented on my Charting My Spiritual Path video recommended this to me, so I scooped it up and read it. I really enjoyed this, actually. So this is copyright 1979, just to give you a bit of context. It was very easy to read. Elaine's writing style worked for me. She's very, very educated and comes at things from an educated or an education background. You can just tell, but it's comprehensive, and there's a lot of breaking down of parts of the Gnostic Gospels and how those may have had a play in how sort of church things, church dogmas and traditions were founded. And she doesn't really give opinion, it seems to me. I mean, I don't know if that's fair to say, but it doesn't feel like I'm reading her personal opinions about all this. It feels like I'm reading an exposition or like a sort of an exploration of how you would compare like the church traditions' views of things with sort of a lot of the things that come up in the Gnostic Gospels. And I found this so fascinating. I actually ended up picking up her most recent book. And here's another one. So there's lots of great notes and references and a fabulous bibliography and index and such in here as well. But I feel like it breaks down most of the primary things that come up when you start to dig into the Gnostic Gospels and want to learn more about them. And also maybe where a lot of the controversy is between like the church and the Gnostic Gospels. Really super interesting. I loved this. It didn't like feel fast paced, but it's actually not that long. Like if you look at the page count, because it's not a very big book, like if you hold it next to When God Had a Wife, like physically it's smaller, and the print, no, I guess the print's not that big, but it felt like it just kind of flew by. It didn't feel fast, but it also felt like it was short, if that makes sense. But including the conclusion, we're only looking at 150 pages or so. Anyway, punchline is, this was really enjoyable and interesting to read. And I feel like of all of the things I've seen that are Gnostic Gospel specific, I feel like this is the most neutral in feel. It didn't feel like it was trying to tip into any specific dogma. And this is also somebody who I feel like has great respect for all sides of the discussion. So it didn't feel pejorative or like condescending to any side of the conversation, but really presented, I think, where there's sticking points and where there's like interesting things to explore and where there's interesting things to look at. So if you've been curious about Gnostic stuff, I feel like this is a great sort of primer. And when I looked this up, it's kind of shocking how well this has stood the test of time, because it's still one of the #1 books on the Amazon bestsellers for this subject matter, for anything Gnostic related. This still sits in like the #1, #2 spot. And it's like a 50-year-old book now. Well, 40-year-old book? 79. It's 25. Yeah. So like a 45-year-old book. Like, come on. Incredible. Well done, Elaine. I also got into this month Tarot and the Gates of Light. Okay, so here's the story with this book for me. I saw Mark Horn speak, and he was specifically speaking about the content of this book, basically, at a tarot conference. And I really enjoyed his discussion. I picked up the book and then I shelved it, and it's been on my shelf ever since. But I stumbled on a social media post by Bennabelle Wen, who had made a little like vlog during COVID, and she had been in that vlog, she had been reading this book. And it reminded me that I had it, and it just so happened that the timing, this is a book basically that takes you through sort of a Kabbalistic tour, I don't know, takes you through the practice. It's a practice called counting the Omer, which is definitely something that is more associated with Jewish tradition. It's not something I'm personally familiar with, but Mark Horn had indicated that this could be something you can like pair with tarot, and it can be a really interesting thing that is accessible for people to try. This is a very well formatted book. To me, counting the Omer feels a lot like a deck and walk. You're sort of taking a tour through pairs of Sephirot from the Tree of Life, from the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, alongside tarot cards that are associated with those Sephirot combinations, and sort of reading about them. And I actually read a good chunk of this book. I think I got through about 4 weeks of just reading it. I wasn't trying to do the practice, so to speak. I was just reading it. And there's some really great expositions on the cards and these different combos and how they were associated with the different Sephirot. And I got partway in, and it didn't feel like it was where I was at right now. I was having a lot of fun reading the entries, and there are some, oh my gosh, if you want a book to sink your teeth into, there are some fabulous sort of journal prompts or questions for reflection throughout this for every set of cards. So every day basically has different combinations of cards. So based on the Sephirot that are associated with that particular day. So there's more to it. I did read all the intro, and I basically read this entire thing straight through, like I said, about week 4. So I got about 300 pages, I guess about 250 pages in. And then I kind of was like, okay, I feel like I'm not getting a whole lot out of it. I'm just reading it to read it. So had the experience. I think it's a really good book. I don't know that counting the Omer is for me, but it was really cool to read, and very well thought out book with lots of really juicy tidbits in here. So enjoyable, but just, yeah, I think I've convinced myself that I was not wrong to pick it up, and that it had lots and lots of great wisdom in here. It's just not something I'm drawn to at the moment. So this is just a sampling on the table right here of everything I worked with, because not everything would fit. If you ever wonder if working with cards is like literally a part of my routines and life, this series should prove that it is. But regardless, had a lot of fun working with all these decks and learning about them and experiencing them. I, of course, also worked with Sassy Dragon's Tarot and Unicorn's Journey Tarot and member readings and pulling cards for myself just randomly whenever I felt like it. So those being my decks are always going to be in my rotation somewhere. But these were the ones that kind of like I was experimenting with and playing with throughout May. I would love to hear what you've been working with and how it worked out for you. So let us know in the comments down below. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. As always, I appreciate you so, so, so much. Extra big thank you goes out to the members of my Unicorn Fam channel membership for supporting me and the work I do here. It really makes such a difference, and I'm so grateful every day for all of you who participate in this space with me and co-create it with me. Thank you so much. And to all of you watching, make sure you subscribe so you see my videos in your subscription feed. It's one of the easiest ways to make sure you don't miss any content. And if you could like this video if you enjoyed it and leave a comment down below, that also is really great, and I love to engage and have those conversations with y'all. I'm pretty active in my comments the first day or two a video goes up, and then it sort of peters off. But if you can catch me in those first couple days, I try to respond to a lot of you and have those conversations, and I really enjoy that aspect of making videos here on YouTube. So I will watch for those comments. But as always, thank you so, so much. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.